And with that, we're almost done for this section. But there's one last very important Go feature you must know when working with arrays, slices, or maps. And that would be the for loop. Now, you did learn about this for loop earlier in the course already. You could use it to create an infinite loop, or you could also use it to have a fixed number of iterations. Now, when working with slices, arrays, or maps, so with collections that store a number of items, you can also use the for loop to go through all these items and perform some operation for every item. Because that indeed is something you'll typically need to do quite a bit when writing Go code. And the syntax for doing that is pretty easy. Let's say we want to go through all our usernames, so all the items of that slice. And it does not matter if the slice was created with make or not, just to be clear. If we want to go through all the usernames, we can use the special range keyword and then thereafter usernames. This will tell Go that we want to go through all the usernames. But in order for this to be useful for us, we have to put something between for and range. And that would be two variables. For example, index and value. Written like this, that would be the final syntax for writing a for loop that goes through all items in usernames. And these two variables here are needed because this range keyword essentially exposes two values related to the usernames slice for every iteration of this for loop. It will give you the index of the item it's currently looking at, and for every iteration that will be a different item, step by step going through the entire slice. And it will give you the item itself, so the value that's stored at that index in usernames. So therefore here, to see what we get, we can simply print index and also value. And of course, these names are up to you. I just named them index and value because that's what we get, but you could also use I and val or whatever you want. So that of course would also work. But here I'll go for index and value, and to be clear what's what, I'll print that like this. And with that added, if we run this application, you see this output here, where I get index 0, value Julie, index 1 and an empty value, index 2, value Max, index 3, value Manuel. And that's exactly what we store in our usernames slice. We create it with two empty slots, then we store Julie for the first slot. That's why at index 0 we have Julie. We store nothing in the second slot, so at index 1, that's why here we have an empty value. And then we append two users, so Max will have index 2, as you can also see down here, and Manuel has index 3. And that's how you can easily go through all these values. And of course in here, you're not limited to printing those values, instead you can do whatever you want. You can call some other function that takes that value as an input and does something with it. You can create structs, you can do whatever you need to do. So everything is possible here. And this for loop does not just exist for slices. You can of course also use it with arrays in the same way you use it for slices, and also for maps. And for maps, it's also still the same syntax. So we still get our index and value, we use the range keyword, and then we just refer to a map. So to course ratings, for example, instead of a slice. Now here we could rename index to key, since that's the better term for this identifier that we have in a map. But of course, as mentioned, this name is up to you. And then here we can also perform any action we want and, for example, output these values. Here, just outputting the key instead of the index. Well, and with that, if we run this, you see that down here, I'm getting my map for loop output, and I'm getting my keys here, as you can see. And I'm then also, of course, getting the values that are stored for these different keys. And therefore, again, this is an important feature because whenever you have some operation that should be performed for every item in a map, this for loop is your friend.